It's the ultimate travel guide from the people who know it best. Weekends with Yankee. Matunuck Village is located in the town of South Kingstown on the southern coast of Rhode Island. Here on a salt pond protected by barrier beaches, a bold experiment is taking place. An oyster farm is showing the world how seafood can be farmed using sustainable and ecologically sound practices. Perry Raso, the owner-operator of Matunuck Oyster Farm, grew up in South Kingstown. He also owns the Matunuck Oyster Bar, where Richard joins him to learn about the history of the farm and his passion for aquaculture.
How did a guy like you get into the oyster business?
Well, I started digging little neck clams with a bull rake when I was around 12 years old. Started doing it after school and on weekends, 30, 40 bucks every time I went out. The gratification of pulling that rake up with essentially money in it was, was incentive to keep pulling on the rake. Yeah.
Tell me what it's like growing up in this area.
It's a really unique little corner of the world. For me, the coastal ponds, the saltwater estuaries really make it special. As a kid growing up, playing and exploring the ponds just as part of your everyday activities, really, I think, shapes people around here.
After graduating from the University of Rhode Island with a degree in aquaculture, Perry got a grant to open a 1-acre oyster farm in his home state. As part of the grant, he worked to educate the world about the benefits of aquaculture.
Aquaculture is the fastest growing food producing business in the world. And in the next 50 years, we are going to have to grow more seafood than we've grown in the existence of mankind.
Matunuck Farm has now grown to 7 acres, and its sustainable practices have not gone unnoticed. In 2019, Perry was nominated for a New England Leopold Conservation Award.
Why is aquaculture important?
Throughout history, more and more people have gone fishing and caught more fish. Until about the 1980s, it started to plateau. So now we have this plateauing supply and this increasing demand, this widening gap. So aquaculture is the only way to fill the widening gap between the supply from the wild and the demand from the population.
When I picture in my mind farmers growing things, I think of seeds. Do you start with seeds?
So we do start with seeds. The seeds are tiny animals. We get that seed from a hatchery in Maine. 1 million animals fits in about the volume of a grapefruit. Wow. And we put them in a nursery system in the estuary, the salt pond, where water's pumped by them at an increased rate, boosting their growth from like 1 millimeter, the size of a grain of sand, to around 15 millimeters. And that's what you're gonna see out at the farm is oysters between 15 millimeters, the size of a dime, and market size, everything in between.
The farm is located on Potter Pond, a shallow salt pond created by glaciers. It's just a short boat ride from the restaurant. Now it's time for Richard to get to work.
So this is Matunuck Oyster Farm. Started as a 1-acre farm down here, expanded to 3 acres and then 7 acres. Each of these 60 floating lines have 27 cages with 6 bags of oysters in each cage. In between each floating line is the submerged lines. Our older and larger animals go in these submerged lines with submerged trays or cages, and the oysters sit in the cages on the sea floor.
It's an interesting terminology, using animals.
Yeah, people always bring that up. I don't know why. It's just, I started calling them animals, and they're animals, and yeah, it's livestock. It's livestock.
Livestock. And you say you do this year-round?
All year, yep. Big part of the process is separating the different size classes of oysters, the big oysters from the small oysters from the medium oysters. That's a constant process. And then rebagging the oysters. The bags get fouled up with seaweed. And so we have to swap the bags out. That's what the farmers are doing today, is separating the different size classes of oysters and then putting them into fresh bags.
Wow, when I think of a farm, this is not what I envision, but for you, I guess this is a farm.
This is what I think of when I think of a farm, yeah.
Well, I'd like to walk among the animals.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
There's 16 million oysters in the farm.
16 million?
16 million.
That's more than people in Rhode Island.
For sure. But they're at all different size classes. Most of them are not market size yet. But, the idea is we sell oyster seed to other farmers when it's about the size of a quarter or a $half, and then we grow some out for our own use as well.
You spend a lot of time out here.
Sure.
Is it meditative?
Yeah, I mean, out here, more meditative. And you know, the grass is always greener. When I'm at the restaurant, I'm like, man, I wish I was at the oyster farm.
Yeah,
When I'm
right.
At the oyster farm, it's really windy. I'm like, man, can't wait to get back to the restaurant.
I've often heard oysters compared to wine, where people really do taste almost the environment they grow in. So what would be in the environment that these oysters grow in?
The characteristics of the water, really, the phytoplankton, what kind of algae they're eating, which will lend to their different flavor and appearance and texture. Salinity is probably the most notable difference, the brininess of the oyster. The open ocean here is 32 parts per thousand, and the salt ponds are less than that. Some are 30 parts per thousand, like this pond, and others are like 20 parts per thousand if you go west of here. And that will lend to their brininess. Seasonality has some impact too. They'll also get sweeter due to glycogen stores that they build to get them through the winter.
There's a lot of life in these trays.
Yeah, there's definitely, studies show there's 10 to 10,000 times more biodiversity within an oyster farm than there is in adjacent water bodies. So it's definitely increases the amount of living things in the area. Let's bring it up on the dock so we can take a better look at it.
All right, here we go. On the deck. Wow, that's a good haul of oysters, huh?
Yeah, a few hundred in here. Some of them are market size.
Yeah.
You look for the nice, consistent, symmetrical teardrop look, you know, nice deep cup. If it's thin, we don't want to sell it.
And how fast will these now be served? If you wanted to, could these be eaten in the next hour?
Yeah, well, we'll harvest these and bring them in the fridge, and then the shuckers will grab them after they're done with what's on their raw bar and keep the cycle going. We're kind of trying to run it as tight as we can in the restaurant, so we're always having fresh product.
You must be a good shucker, because I see you have all your fingers and no major scars.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I've definitely had some accidents with the shucking knife before, so.
After a tough day of farming, Richard is ready to enjoy the fruits of his labor. So they head back to the restaurant, where they serve upwards of 6,000 oysters per day. Matunuck oysters, as well as other varieties.
Thank you.
Wow, look at that.
All right, so we have a variety of 4 different oysters here. This first one is a West Coast oyster. It's the only one that's a different species than the other oysters on the plate. This is salt pond oyster. It's grown in Point Judith Pond on the sea floor. And then we have the Matunuck oyster, which we grow out here. So there's 3 obviously different oysters. And then over here we have a moonstone oyster. All these different farms and all these different methods and different unique water bodies, bays and estuaries lend to the different appearance and flavor. To open the oyster, we have to pop that adductor muscle. It's always 2/3 of the way up the oyster to the right. And then slicing it off the bottom shell.
There we go. All right, so this is yours, and what kind of taste should I be looking for in
It's
this?
crisp, briny, the sweet finish.
That is so nice. That is nature's candy. What is it that you love about your farm environment?
I love that I'm able to make a living on, the pond where I grew up. I appreciate, South Kingstown, Rhode Island as one of the most special places I've been. And so being able to, not just live, but also make a living here is pretty good.